Quigley from the University of St Andrews in Scotland, and I am what is called the ACM SIGCHI Vice President for Conferences. You might have seen me this morning on stage. That wasn't because of that role. It was a different role. And as you discover, and as all of us discover, as a volunteer, there's actually many roles that volunteers take on. So even if you're doing one thing, like just for one conference, like for WIST, I was just a reviewer this year, but then for other conferences you might be an associate chair, and then for other conferences you might be something else. So when you're a volunteer, you end up doing many things at the same time because you're interested in the community and you're interested in giving back. So my slides aren't going to work, but that's okay. I can talk and explain the point of this sort of session. So I actually had a look back at all the things that you said. So if you signed up for this session, I went back and looked at all the different things that you said you're interested in learning about. So I can tell you some of those things. You want to know about what are the key responsibilities of being a volunteer. You want to know about funding. You want to know how is a conference like WIST organized. You'd like to become a more active part of the special interest group on HCI or the special interest group on graphics, Graph. You'd like practical advice on how to become a volunteer or practical steps that you've been a volunteer and you want to do more. It's rare, in my experience, that actually someone it hasn't done any volunteering. As you'll see when I give you some examples in a moment, everyone has done something already. If you're here, chances are you've already actually been a volunteer. You've given of your time. And even if you've just been a reviewer, you've given of your time. So everything in these conferences and conference series is based on our time that we give to each other. So if you could see my slides, but just imagine, I'll do it through interpretive dance. There's this amazing slide here, but you can't see it, but that's okay. What I'm actually showing you is I went in and picked out some of your names, and I just did a search to see what you've already done. So if you go onto the SIGCHI website, and you go to the little search icon on the top right, and you type your name, here we go. You can actually see what people have done. So, for example, Nitesh, who isn't actually in the room right now, but signed up, is basically was one of the Diversity and Inclusion Lunch Chairs for CHI 2018. Other things like CHI 2017, the Language Inclusion Chair, that was Tillman, and then even something like UbiComp, you've had people who are the Publications Chair. So in the room, just because this is about you, not me, actually is David still here? David, are you leaving? Are you staying? You are. You're volunteering to do. So just can you give us an example of some of the volunteering that you've done in the past? Just one or two things that you've done.
I started as basic video chair, communication chair, because I was invited to talk on YouTube. Then I got asked if I want to serve as video chair for SIGCHI, not video chair for organizing video for with women out there who also get back into the big organizing it for essentially all specialized conferences. So the conference runs the video report, they talk to us, and we help them with equipment. And sometimes there's also we're still active video chairs for CHI and we're jumping in if something goes wrong. So the video part also two programs, that's the WIST program and CHI program committee and volunteers. And also this year's innovation chair for WIST.
Okay. You're doing too much, maybe. Yeah, so you have to balance your volunteerism. So as we'll go along, thank you, he's off to volunteer. So as we go along, I might call on other people that I know who've done other types of work. So this is me. I have a day job as an academic, teaching, admin, other responsibilities. And a few years ago, I was appointed the adjunct chair for specialized conferences, and then I became the vice president for all conferences, including WIST, but all 24 specialized conferences that we sponsor. I'm also an ACM distinguished speaker, which means I travel to different countries and I give lectures next year I'm going to Colombia, this year I'm going to Estonia, Indonesia, different places like this. I'm on the European Council for Best Papers, that's why you saw me this morning, and I'm also the general co-chair for CHI in 2021. Along with my co-chair, Professor Yoshifumi Kitamura from Tohoku in Japan. That's my email address. You can follow me on Twitter. If you're interested in what the volunteer role of VP for conferences is and what it involves, because it all sounds like that doesn't sound very clear, he talked too fast, and he was covering too many different pieces of work, look at my annual report. Just today, one of our sponsors who's asked to give money to this conference said, Oh, I actually thank you for your report. I read your report. So this is kind of scary because we need those sponsors to continue sponsoring conferences like this to afford all of the nice things that we have. So the report is there. It's for you. It's public. All the information I'm telling you and more is in that report. So I would encourage you to go onto the website and have a look at it's in, if you go to the SIGCHI website, it's under news and it's the current bottom article on the news feed. If you go in there, you'll see VP report, which I published a few months ago. Anyway, so where do we all sit as volunteers? So the ACM has nearly 100,000 members spread across the world. These are professional members, student members, lots of different countries, lots of different areas. Each within the ACM, we have these things called special interest groups, SIGs, okay? And there are many SIGs. There are 37 SIGs, some on software engineering, some on graphics, some on high-performance computing, some on mobile, and SIGCHI is one of them, but it's only one of them. So this conference, WIST, is co-sponsored by SIGCHI and SIGGRAPH, because the intellectual underpinnings of this community isn't just HCI, it's also a little bit of computer graphics. Okay, so it's those two things together that make WIST. And that's WIST. UbiComp is a little bit HCI and a little bit mobile, and that's what makes UbiComp. And then you go over to IUI, the Intelligent User Interface Conference, that's a little bit AI and a little bit Chi. Okay? It sounds like I'm about to break into that song. It's all a little bit country. Okay? But it's basically what is the intellectual underpinnings of each of these conferences, and those typically are the SIGs that kind of make up the backing for it. SIGCHI is large. It's one of the largest SIGs. There's about 3,000 delegates attend Chi. That's growing. About 6,000 attend the other 23 specialized conferences. So we're pushing towards 10,000 delegates each year who go to all of our conferences around the world. We have an executive committee, some of whom are appointed, some of whom are elected. If you're a member of SIGCHI, you would have got to elect these people in the last round of elections, which happened a few months ago. And I'm, as VP for conferences, I'm responsible for the 24 conferences. But I don't do the kind of day-to-day stuff for each individual conference, of course, because each conference has a steering committee, and each steering committee appoints general chairs and paper chairs and conference chairs, and they themselves then appoint and ask people to help them to be posters chairs and video chairs and demo chairs and panels chairs and keynote chairs and vision chairs and whatever it actually might be. And one of those people might be a student volunteer chair, and they then run a process for bringing in student volunteers. And each conference has its own way of doing it. So WIST has a very established process. For example, at the moment, Chi has, I'm sure many students here have probably applied to this Chi student volunteer pool, and maybe you've been accepted, maybe you've not been accepted. But I think last year it was nearly 1,000 students applied for 150 positions. And the software that actually is being used to basically make the decisions is being rewritten at the moment, so that actually we can have more oversight. Algorithmic fairness, so we actually know what decisions are being made and why some people are getting chosen and other people aren't actually getting chosen when you have that many. But at the end of the day, it's described as a lottery, okay? And it is a lottery, okay? All the steering committee chairs come together once a year, and I'm hosting that meeting next month in New Jersey. And that's where all the conferences come together. Now, in your bag, if you got a bag for the conference, which I hope you did, you should have got one of these, okay? Now, if this is for how many people this is their first conference they've ever been to? Okay, a few. So how many people have been to only one of these conferences on this list? Okay, okay, let's go to how many people have been to 5 of these conferences? Let's go down. 5, 4, 3, a few 3, 2. So if you've been to this and Chi, that counts as 2. Okay, 2, and then only 1. Okay, so if you teach HCI, if you do research in HCI, if you're interested in it professionally for your career, I would just spend a little bit of time just learning what all these acronyms mean. It can be quite eye-opening if you've never actually gone through this list and gone, what is this ICMI thing? What do they do? I've never heard of that. Okay, so who doesn't know what ICMI stands for? And that's not unusual, okay? The International Conference on Multimodal Interaction or Interfaces. Okay? So that's not unusual. But you could go through this whole list, like anybody who was in the session earlier on robots, for example, the robot interaction, there's a whole conference on human-robot interaction. This year was in Chicago. 600 people attended. It's a massive conference. And it's co-sponsored between us and the IEEE. So I really would encourage you just to scan through this list and go, what do all these things do? for your teaching, for your research, for collaborations, for hiring people, for being a volunteer, and actually for broadening out your perspective on HCI. I would honestly spend a little time. You can tonight at the demo session, you can play a game, see which of these I know the name of, and if I get it wrong, I'll buy you a drink. I'm very confident. I won't need any type of drink, soft drink, alcoholic drink, whatever it is. Ask me a name, I will know what it is. At this stage, I'm fairly confident. Anyway, this is the executive committee. It's not just me. I am one of many people, because we're all volunteers. And all these people do different types of work. So some people look after membership and communications, some people look after the finances. Our conference budgets across all 24 conferences are over $5 million. Okay, that's a lot of money moving in and out of a small part of the overall ACM each year. So that has to be kind of carefully tracked so that we don't go bankrupt, and we continue to basically break even. We've got people who deal with publications, people who deal with conferences, that's me, people who deal with chapters. And if you're not part of a local chapter, I would encourage you to look into what is a chapter and how can I get involved. And I know there's some folks up here who are actually members of chapters. The other thing is, if you signed up for this session, I will send you a copy of these slides, okay? So you'll have all this data. Okay, if you didn't sign up for this session, sign up for this session. And therefore I have your email address and then I can contact you, okay? Operations, so for example, Roman and David, who were just talking about videos, they're part of the operations group. And the operations group are interested in video, interested in the PCS system, interested in the data that we have, interested in the archive that we maintain of all these different conferences, interested in all the operational things across all 24 conferences that really matter. And they're all volunteers. And they all started out somewhere, okay? Things for CHI, awards, and diversity. They're all different topics that we do. This is our structure. We have a council that meets once a year, but we're always in communication with each other, and that's all the conference chairs across all 24 conferences. We have a smaller board, and they're the ones who make decisions on money. So when a conference, for example, like WIST, this year, I think, I could get this wrong. Let me think, how much did they get? They got, it's on video, so I'm not going to get this wrong. So the SIGCHI Conferences Development Fund was applied to by WIST, and they got an award of a certain amount of money, which I'm not going to quote because I actually don't know the number off the top of my head. But it was a significant amount of money, and that actually was used for paying travel grants. If you came in on the HCI Ambassadors program, part of that was being supported by that. What else was it being used for? It's off the top of my head. The good thing is that grant application is on the SIGCHI website, so I don't actually have to remember what it is. I can just go to the SIGCHI website now and you can find it and you can see what the money is actually being used for, because it's all transparent. All the money that comes in, all the money that goes out, it's all listed on each individual conference year's website. That's another thing the operations group do. It actually maintains a lot of that data, which is non-trivial amount of work. We also have a CHI steering committee. That's new. That's only been going for about 2 years, maybe a year and a half. And that's got lots of people involved in it, from people interested in accessibility through to past chairs, through to future chairs. And just recently I was appointed to this because I'm going to be one of the future chairs for CHI. So my first meeting of this is tomorrow, 8 p.m. German time, which is good for me, not so good for my co-chair who's in Japan, because 8 p.m. in Germany is, I'm not quite sure. Actually, no, that's okay for him because he's here. He's actually at this conference, so it's fine for him too. So it's tricky when you're doing this kind of stuff globally. It's hard to manage everybody. We've got people dealing with operations, then there's chapters, publications, diversity and inclusion. There's lots and lots of people involved. Okay, lots of conferences, lots of different things. And we've grown, okay? So you heard this morning, go back a few years and look at the size of WIST, and that's comparable with the size of CHI a few years back. Okay, that's true. This year at UbiComp, they had nearly 800 delegates. That's nearly the size that CHI was when it began all the way back in 1982. So these conferences are growing. And you're thinking, why? Why is it growing all the time? Okay, just think logically about it. Okay, so go back to 1982, think about the penetration of digital technology into the world around us, and now project forward through the last 30, 40 years and think about what's happened. The amount of points of contact between the human and the computation has exploded. We didn't have computers in cars, now we do. We didn't have computers in multimodal types of interaction. We didn't have speech interfaces. We didn't have eye tracking, blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is, the field has exploded, and as a result, more teaching, more research, more people in all of these different areas of specialism, and all of that has generated more interest in the field, which means we've expanded. And two things we have conferences and we have in-cooperation conferences, so both of those have expanded over time. And we've spread out geographically. Okay, so back in the day, so if you go back to 1995 when we started doing In Cooperation, it was very much North America and Europe, and then eventually a little bit of Africa, then eventually a little bit of South America. But if you go and look at that, the penetration in the rest of the world, outside of those kind of traditional parts, is low. And that's the next frontier. That's where we need to think about. We need to think more about Latin America, more about Africa, more about the subcontinent in India, more about these regions where there's still huge number of students, huge numbers of practitioners, huge numbers of people, and there's huge opportunities for us as a community to reshape the reality as HCI impacts that world. So it's billions of people whose lives we can all touch. We've grown, and over time, the conferences have come in. And you can see WIST in there became a sponsored conference around 1989. So this was the third SIGCHI sponsored conference that we had. So we had CHI first, then CSCW came along, and then WIST. And then boom, all the others basically came in over time. That's not necessarily when the conference started, but that's when they became sponsored by SIGCHI, which means we're financially responsible. So if this conference loses a ton of money, we have SIGCHI and we have the ACM to basically be there to support us in the days that we lose money. And I ran WIST. I was the general chair for WIST in 2013, and we lost a little bit of money. Not a huge amount of money. I think it was $750 or something. Again, it's all on the website, so you can see my shame of losing money at the conference. And that can happen, okay? Volcanoes can go off. All kinds of things can happen that can throw your conference out of alignment. And last year, 9 of our conferences lost money. Okay? And you're thinking, oh, that's terrible. You're like, well, it's cyclical, okay? So sometimes you lose money, sometimes you make money, and hopefully over time it all balances out so that we can have these great experiences without freaking out each time you're presented with a huge loss as a conference chair. My first chair conference that I ever ran was the Pervasive conference in Dublin, and I very vividly remember about a month and a half before the conference where the people we were working with that was helping us book said the conference is about to lose 70,000 euros. Like, how are we about to lose 70,000 euros? You're like, well, your delegates aren't booking the hotel. And you're sitting there going, so they're not booking the hotel. Big deal. They're like, we have to fill those rooms. If we don't fill those rooms, we have to pay for those rooms. You're like, this would have been good to know 12 months ago when all people were applying to come to the conference. So sometimes for these conferences, we block book a set of rooms. And if they don't get taken up, there's a charge that gets associated with that. Okay? So it's tricky doing the finances of a conference and making sure that it breaks even. And that's why we have SIGCHI, it's why we have the ACM. And the reason I do my work as a volunteer is to make it easier for other chairs to do their work. We move around a lot. Mobile HCI looks like this. UbiComp looks like this. But again, you'll notice you're not seeing a lot of Latin America in there. You're not seeing a lot of Africa in there. You're not seeing a lot of subcontinental work in India and other places there. Okay? And even our presence in Asia has only really improved in the last 3 to 4 years. Up until then, our presence in Southeast Asia and Asia wasn't great. As conference series. This is the size of things. They're all very different. CHI isn't even on this list. So you go everything from group all the way through to big conferences like WIST. And this is the numbers from October 9th. So you see what I said up there? This goes out of date, okay? This is very important because this conference just started. And what did Patrick say? Or no, what did Albrecht say? How many people did he say were at this conference? How many? We were all listening to his opening remarks. I know the number. How many? 500 people. Is that the correct number? Yeah, that's the correct number. That's what he said anyway. So you can see here the WIST number there is not correct, okay? Because that's last year's WIST number. So it needs to be bigger. So these numbers are always fluctuating as the conferences close, effectively as they start to happen. And even the UbiComp number here is not right. Because that number I put up only last week and they haven't finally got their final numbers for UbiComp. So they're big and they're growing all the time. We have more conferences that have joined us, more in cooperation events. Some have retired, so some conferences have gone away because they're just not a community behind them anymore that's willing to or has the time or the energy or the impetus to continue that conference series. Things like AutoUI have joined us. Things like CI joined us last year. And at any given time, 4 to 5 conferences are discussing with us, can we come on board to the SIGCHI family and what would that actually mean? And sometimes that can take years of negotiation and discussion because it's not so simple. Like there's lots of great things that SIGCHI provides to conferences like access to the video equipment, access through our portal to the SIGCHI digital library point, banners at conferences, all of our volunteerism activities, all of our diversity and inclusion and funding, etc., all this great stuff, but it doesn't come at zero cost. There's overheads, like any family. I'm Irish, I have 45 cousins, so just imagine your 45 cousins or your 10 cousins or your 2 cousins. There's tension in that. You know, it's not perfect in any way. There's being part of a family, wonderful, but there is an overhead associated with it, which can be sometimes a bit of a burden if you're joining the family. Now, for you, for volunteers, where do you want to pick in? Okay, so today, this morning, you saw Patrick and Albrecht up on stage, and you think, maybe that's where I want to be. I want to be that person who introduces the conference, and then I get to orchestrate everything, and I'll be the king of the castle. Okay, but realistically, you don't always get to do that. And actually, for volunteers, that's not all that matters. Being that single point person who's up there on stage for a few minutes at the beginning of the conference, that's not the pinnacle, and that's not what the point of this activity is, because it all matters. It really all matters. And if you've only done, let's say, a student volunteer role, and you're saying, oh, I'd like to move on to something else, don't say, well, next thing I want to do is be the program chair. You want to build up experience so that when you actually get to doing these more and more senior roles, it's a little bit scary, but also mostly fun. Okay, you don't want to go into something from 0 to 100 miles an hour and then have to learn everything along the way. That could be kind of torture, and it wouldn't be such a fun, because you all have day jobs. You're either PhD students, you're postdocs, you're academics, you're in industry. You've got day jobs that fulfill a lot, or suck up a lot of your real time. This is on top of that. And it's this two-sided coin. Okay, so there's a lot of things that are logistical. Okay, there's a lot of things around being student volunteers, dealing with publicity, being the student volunteer chair. And on the other side, there's all the things to do with the program. There's deciding on which paper should get in, who should be a reviewer, who should run the doctoral consortium, who should come to the doctoral consortium, dealing with videos, being the local chair, being the web chair. And you can see they're all on two sides. You know, sometimes it's all to do with the program, and sometimes it's all to do with the logistics. But as a volunteer, it really, honestly, all does matter. And you want to do lots of these things if you're interested in volunteerism, you want to get the opportunity to do many of these different things. I won't show you the spreadsheet. I used to show this spreadsheet when I gave this talk, and then I realized actually it's kind of scary. So, for example, when I ran WIST in 2013, we used a spreadsheet, and I tracked everything we did through the course of probably 2 years of planning around WIST. And of course, now I'm doing Chi, so I've already started planning, 6 months ago. So my spreadsheet's a little bit bigger, as you can imagine. And you have to start planning. I can't tell you where the venue is going to be. I can't even tell you the country it's going to be, because it actually hasn't been officially announced yet. But what I can tell you is, I went to visit, and the building's not built yet. Okay, so if you're coming to Chi 2021 in Magic Country, you'll get to find out about next year at next year's Chi in Glasgow. The venue is still a hole in the ground. Okay, but I have faith. Okay, because you have to plan. You have to say, well, that's okay. They say they're going to open in 2020, and it'll be fine. I saw cranes. I saw iron. I have faith. Okay, and you have backup plans. Of course, you have backup plans. But that's definitely an article of faith. Like when you go and you see a hole in the ground, and you think, when people come to Chi 2021 and they stand there and they look at this beautiful new convention center, this is great, what a great choice. You're like, yeah, great choice now. Imagine going back 3 or 4 years and actually seeing the cranes and all the empty halls and going, oh yeah, that's where we'll have the doctoral consortium up there in that bit of empty air. And oh, that's where we'll have the exhibits over there. Like, is that stable? And they're literally building it right now, but it'll be finished in 18 months' time. So have faith. It'll be a great conference. But this is what you have to do. You have to plan. And WIST is like this. WIST had to be planned. So let's just show you some of the things that other people have done. So Lauren Terveen was our former SIGCHI president, and he started out as a reviewer. So how many people here have reviewed a paper anytime for any conference? Okay? So that's a good starting point for anybody who wants to get into volunteerism. Become known. Send somebody your poster paper, send somebody whatever piece of work you're currently working on, let yourself be known to others. And then if you're asked to do a review, do a good job. That's very important. Not just getting the job, but doing the job. And then he worked his way through. These are good entry points, okay? So if you're doing something and you want to become a volunteer, being the person who organizes a workshop and brings a group together, that can be a very powerful opportunity. Going through being a PC member, getting onto a doctoral consortium, he worked his way all the way up. And eventually he became SIGCHI president, and then he went on to become the ACM, he sits on the ACM Council, which is our top governing body of, and it's all volunteers. Helena, who's now our president of SIGCHI, she started as a nursing home volunteer. Okay, then she became a hospital volunteer. She went all of her through. And one of the piece of advice she would give if she was standing here is, she was once asked to be the chair's assistant to Chi. Now, it doesn't sound glamorous, but boy, oh boy, do you learn a lot. So if somebody asks you to say, I would really want somebody to be an assistant, and what means you get copied in on everything. Every strategic, every top-level decision, every major activity that's going on, you'll be copied in. Because the person who's the chair will say, oh, can you deal with that? They're asking me to book something, I don't have time, can you help me do that piece or this piece? But you have a lot of visibility. So I think Helena learned a huge amount about the CHI conference by being the chair's assistant and just helping out. Does it sound glamorous? No. Does it sound like she gets to stand on stage? Absolutely not. Did it help shape her career and actually give her a pathway through doing that to lots of other volunteerism? Absolutely. But also gave her a huge amount of knowledge about the CHI conference that not everybody has. Okay? So she's gone on and done many, many other things. And then the last executive committee, she was the vice president, and now she's the president of SIGCHI. This is Svi. He's an IUI steering committee chair. And he's, again, had a similar sort of path of moving through doing small things and doing bigger things and getting more and more experience and growing his portfolio. And then finally, I'll show you me, okay? So I have a good memory for this kind of stuff because I've been volunteering for over 30 years. So the very first thing I had to do was I had to collect the dues from my Cub Scout pack, which meant I had to collect 35, and then I had to increase it to 40p. So if you ever wonder like why the registration costs of these conferences go up, because eventually you want to do more, and then people expect more, and then you think, oh well, actually, if we did this little bit extra, we could do something more. Anyway, I was a Cub Scout pack leader, and I was 7, I believe, at this time, and I had to basically collect the money. And I had to basically write it down in my little book, and then I had to put the money away into my little lockbox, and I had to put it away in the little trunk, and I had to basically buy stuff. So I had to basically use that money to buy a hatchet, and then I had to use that money to buy a rope, and I had to use that money to buy us a group bus ticket to go on a hike. And then we were out of money, and then I had to collect more money, and then we decided we'd do a bake sale, and then we'd go and we'd clean shoes, and then we'd go and do other things. So I was volunteering and managing and collecting money with my other little 7-year-olds in my little hat. I don't have a photo of that. I imagine I was cute. I hope I was cute. Anyway, so you start out doing little things, but then you work your way through and you do all these things, and you become a volunteer chair, and you're a local chair, a program chair, and then you do something else, and then eventually you do something like being the CHI general chair. But along the way you do lots of stuff. So of course when you see this, you think, this is what I want to be. I want to be there having the great party, and I want to be standing up in front of everybody saying, like, come to WIST. You want to be standing up there at Mobile HCI with your co-chair in Canada. That's our co-chairs for ITS and WIST in St Andrews. My predecessor, who did huge amounts of volunteer work, or you do these kind of sessions. Along the way you think, this is what I want to be. I want to be up there. This is me with my IUI papers co-chair this year, or this is here with my co-chair, Yoshifumi, will be the general chairs. But remember, along the way, you have to be prepared to do this, okay? That's me as Santa back in Japan in 1995, when somebody said, hey, in our 10,000 community, you're the only person who can be Santa. Would you like to be Santa? You're like, okay, I'll be Santa. And then you volunteer and you become Santa for a little while. Okay? So you have to be prepared to do little jobs along the way, and it means you maybe are dressing up as Santa. I actually also do need to pick up this post, I need to update these slides again. How many people attended CHI last year? Only a few. Do you remember the big beaver on stage? That was me, you see? So you always get back in costume as well. And the good thing about that is that didn't stop me being invited to be the general co-chair. I thought that was the end of my career. But anyway, okay, so there's lots of roles, there's lots of things that you can actually do, there's lots of things, there's lots of places. And I would say there's 2 ways of becoming a volunteer. You either wait to be asked, which is the top-down approach, and you have to network and you have to know people and then eventually get asked. That's one way. The other way is the bottom-up way, where if you've done one bit of volunteering work, and then you ask the person who you did the volunteering work for or with to say, look, did I do a good job? Oh, you think I did? Great. Could you recommend me to somebody else? Or actually, the next thing I'd like to do is this. I'd like to help. And that being an assistant, that sounds like a really interesting job. It sounds like a lot of work, but that sounds really exciting. I'd like to do that. So help, if you've done anything, ask those people to help introduce you to other people. And that's a very effective strategy for becoming a volunteer. If you get asked to do a review, do a good review. This is very important. If you're starting out, and the nice thing is I've collected up lots of links here of what other people have said about doing this. So it's not just me telling you. There's some very famous HCI authors have written articles about what it means to do a good HCI review and what's actually involved in it. So go to my webpage, and then you can link through and you see all the articles. I won't pick out any one of them because I'm being recorded, but they're all good. They're all good in different ways because they've got different bits of advice. That's the ACM webpage if you want to get a sense of all the other things, because I've really only told you about conferences and volunteerism within conferences. SIGCHI, it's a great website. We spent a lot of time, a lot of volunteer hours and energy. The operations team took the old website, moved it across. You guys spent, I don't know how many weeks and months and Because the design has to be created, and then you have to create the templates, and you have to get all the content in, and you have to shift all the old content over, and then you have to set up all these processes by which the data can actually manifest itself in this kind of elegant way. And you look at it and think, wow, that must be a company running that. No, it's not. It's people like Roman and people like me and other volunteers who just get in there and add in the data. So it's all volunteer-driven, these kind of websites. So you can find us at sigchi.org, on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. I would definitely give a shout-out to YouTube at this stage. The stats on the YouTube channel are amazing. Roman, do you know how many views the channel have had? But it's millions? It's a lot. And that's getting great publicity, great visibility for your work through that type of channel. Okay. We also have this. This is actually quite interesting, and it's a bit of a kind of a tip, a bit of advice. If you, in your institution, do a press release around your work, mention SIGCHI. I would recommend. Just mention that your paper, your piece of work is going to be shown at the ACM SIGCHI conference called whatever it is, conference you're going to. Why does that matter? Because that's a term that isn't used that often. Okay, SIGCHI, S-I-G-C-H-I. That's a search term, okay? So people who are looking for things around HCI use that as a term to find material. And in my experience, if you mention SIGCHI, you sometimes will appear in this tech news article. And this is a news, how would you describe it, a blog. It's not really a blog. It's kind of like, it's an amalgamation of lots of news articles from the media, from lots of different places, all put into one newsletter per month. And this gets seen at the top level of the ACM. And I know lots of reporters watch this. When this comes out, it triggers follow-on work, it triggers follow-on inquiries. So this is a really good way to publicize your work and mention SIGCHI in your articles, then therefore it'll appear. Well, it won't necessarily appear here, but at least it'll appear in the search results of who's looking for material to put in here. We do 24 conferences, lots of different topics, everything from mobile through to computer-supported cooperative work, everything from interaction design with children, all the way through to Chi and ubiquitous computing. We're all over the world, but we're not all over the world, as you can see, like huge gaps there in Latin America, everything from Mexico all the way down to the tip in Ushuaia, or everything from, and we have had conferences there in the past. It's not like to say we haven't had conferences, it's just from 2017 to 2019, this is what I know about, because I have to approve our either incorporation or sponsor status for all of these conferences. And it's changing, okay? So, for example, actually this picture is slightly out of date. Yeah, I just realized this is slightly out of date. The MUM conference is going to be held in Egypt in January of next year. So there should be a little dot there, so I do need to update this. Because, again, this is done by a volunteer, me. I update this, so it's not always perfectly up to date. I have to go in and type in the data. Like, there's not some magic bit of software that fixes this. It's me trying to keep it as up to date as I possibly can. Okay? So, but I will, the next time I give this talk, I'll fix that and add in some more details. So yes, if it's wrong, you're probably right, but it's not far wrong. It's out by maybe 4 or 5 conferences, because I redid this a few months ago. Anyway, what do? International development, big focus on Asia at the moment, communication and outreach, funding good works, the SIGCHI Student Travel Grant Program. Okay, so here's a good example of something that, how many people knew that SIGCHI had the SIGCHI Student Travel Grant Program? How many people have heard of that before? SIGCHI Student Travel Grant Program. Wow, that's the best I've ever seen at one of these events. That's 50%. If you are one of those students, you definitely need to know about that. If you're a faculty, an advisor, anybody, you need to know about that. We invest through this program over $100,000 each year in student travel grants out to people to attend SIGCHI conferences. Okay. And then the Gary Marsden program, the Gary Marsden Fund, named in the honor of Gary, which is designed for students who are from and currently in what was classified according to the OECD as emerging economies. And there's up to, I forget off the top of my head, there's several $1,000s per travel grant associated with that. So how many people have ever heard of the Gary Marsden Fund? Again, by 50%. So not terrible, okay? But you want to know about these things because it's there for you to actually take advantage of. We have banners at conferences, we do travel grants, we have the open talk. If you're here and you're trying to show your work to industry or other people and they complain to you about the ACM Digital Library and they say, oh, I can't get through the ACM Digital Library, point them at the SIGCHI website and say, go to the SIGCHI website, go to publications, go to the open table of contents, and in there you will see a list of all the conferences that are currently open access through that portal. And again, people who sit on the operations group with Roman do the work of getting all the HTML up onto the website and getting all the links working and making sure it's all accessible. So through that SIGCHI page, you can get all those open tables of contents, and they're open access to anyone in the world, and they don't need an ACM Digital Library account to get to that. So we do lots of things. Gary Marsden, development funds, supporting HCI in developing worlds. How many people have been to a HCI or a SIGCHI-sponsored summer or winter school? So a few people. Keep your eye on those. If you're a student, they're great. They're really... and they're all bottom up, so we maybe provide some of the funding, but it's academics around the world. So like, for example, Stephanie ran one last year in conjunction with the Symposium on Computational Fabrication at MIT. So she got some SIGCHI funding, she got some other funding, and then she announced it, and they ran this beautiful summer school that they had there. And they had a summer school just in Israel last week on cultural heritage that Zvi Kuflik and Jessica ran, and some other people there, and that was a really lovely event as well. So there's lots of these events that are there for typically students. The Open Talk, it's online. I'll put the link, I didn't get to update the slide, but I'll put the link up there for the link to WIST, so before I send you the slides. So SIGCHI is you. SIGCHI is volunteers. SIGCHI is lots of conferences, lots of different people. We need lots of volunteers in lots of different roles. And I'll end there, okay, because I haven't fully updated these slides. I've been running, I just came from Singapore and I didn't fully update these slides. So we have, I realize, not enough time. Sorry if that was a bit of an information overload. But do anybody have any questions? We have 5 minutes before we need to kind of clear out this room. So again, my report has lots of information. These slides will have lots of information. But this is a great chance if you do have a question. So please do ask your question now, because this is usually the point where I get total silence. So please ask a question. Any questions? Yes. How to join the student volunteer for the executive committee? Good question. Okay, so the traditional way that pool has been created is that when the CHI conference has happened, there's 800, 900, 1,000 people who have applied, and then only 150 can be chosen because it's a lottery. That everybody who didn't get selected would have received an email to say, hello, we're running this supplementary program for the Executive Committee student volunteers. Please sign up to this link if you'd like to do that. And last year, probably about 100, 150 people signed up. And then what we do is when we as Executive Committee members need somebody with very specialized skills, we do a search. So, for example, when I needed someone to do data analysis, I go in and I search through that. So I don't just send out a blanket email, because I did that the first time with the banners. The very first time I used that, and that was not a good idea. Because it's not fair. Like, people say, oh, I really want to volunteer, but what you're asking me to do, I don't have the skill set to do that. I'm not a graphic designer. I can't do banners. I don't have access to the tools. I really can't do this. This is not fair. So, because generally when you come into CHI, they'll match you to work. But for the executive committee, it's not about matching people to any piece of generic work. It's a very specific piece of work that we have that we need done.
But how do you update your skill set later?
Okay, it's a good question, yeah. So I would like the so what I'll take from this is that I'll go back to the person who's dealing with volunteers, because we have this idea that we'll create a page where basically every person will have a page that they can kind of update all their skills constantly. But again, some of us has to write that page, somebody has to write the tool, somebody has to create the software to actually manage to do that. So that's not something we have right now. So I think every time you get an opportunity, like so this, for example, I'm going to take, okay, let me say this carefully. When you signed up to this, it said, are you okay with me sharing this data back with the SIGCHI Executive Committee and the future WIST chairs and the SIGGRAPH Committee? And that's what I'll do, okay? I will write to you before I do that to say, by the way, now that I've had the session, if you don't want your data passed forward to either SIGGRAPH, SIGCHI, or the future WIST chairs, please let me know and I'll delete it, okay? But it goes out of date, okay? So you have to kind of, at the moment, we don't have a systematic system where basically everything is being matched. And honestly, the other real challenge in all of this is, as you get up to doing more and more senior roles, you will discover that I've asked many people over the years to do things for me, and if I don't really know them very, very well, and I've got not lots of references from other people who say this person is very reliable, it gets increasingly scary to invite somebody who you don't know to do something that your conference success depends on. So you can't just run these things as an open election and then the top people who are voted in get the role, because you have no idea, they could completely flake out or they've got other work. They just really are overcommitting themselves. So they want this because it sounds nice, but then they're not willing to do the work. So it's this balancing act constantly. And we've had it in the past where people just life intervenes, and they're not willing to say, I have to step back. They'd rather just not do the work properly and let other people try to pick up the ball. So at the beginning, it's definitely about building up experience, getting to be known, getting other people to be known. But there are doorways. So this kind of session is exactly for that reason, so that we can get your names, we can pass them forward. Then the WISP people have them, the SIGGRAPH people have them, the CHI people have them. And then when people like me are starting to do searching, they'll match people. And again, it's not a perfect process. And we are volunteers who are trying to do this. So that's a long answer to a short question. Sorry about that. You have a question?
So, Robert Wazagan from the SIGCHI Chapter. First, thank you very much for this much inspiring talk. I knew about ACM and SIGCHI, but I learned much more during 1 hour and 1 year. There was just some sort of feedback from also the ambassadors workshop yesterday, and also back home. So within the SIGCHI website, there is a section for the ones who have won the award. And it's been positioned under About.
Yeah.
And I had a specific request. Back home, we try to inspire people, and what works very well, it's the video of these people when they are receiving the award. They do, a speech at CHI. And these speeches are really inspiring. The problem is that we could not get all the videos related to these keynote speeches, and I'm interested to know how I can access them systematically, or you could do something in terms of information architecture, because we've been doing user studies with users back home who have access to these videos.
You're asking a good question, because I don't know the answer, but I know who does know the answer to that question. He's sitting right here.
So the question was, I just came in like 15 seconds ago, why are not all talks and the award things recorded?
There are 3 types of awards that are being granted.
Yeah.
The social impact, the research, and the practice.
Yeah.
Back home, we want to inspire people. The videos of these people who have done the keynotes are really inspiring.
I agree on that.
And we tried to reverse engineer whatever you've done to access all these videos. It's not possible.
So,
and also in the information architecture of the website, the awards are being announced. It's terrible because nobody notices.
Okay, so there are 2 answers to that. First, for the website, it was released like, I don't know, half a year ago, and I think if you add the feedback button and kind of tell us, okay, I can't find where this stuff is, we would happily take this into account in the operation. The other part is, which is, where are all the videos? So the paper chairs for CHI decide which rooms are going to be recorded. They do this based on popularity and other heuristics I don't know about. We usually inform them, hey, it's a good idea to record the award talks because this is really the only record. But that doesn't always happen. So this year, I think, was the first year where the award talks were in different rooms, so they were not recorded. And we're going to push, or especially 2 of us are going to push and take this feedback also to the next chairs to that actually this should be recorded. And I agree on that because it should kind of, for the papers you have the paper, you have videos, you have a lot of things for the award talks there, super value, and also popular on YouTube. And for the information architecture, I can highly recommend just go on our YouTube channel. There is kind of nicely curated where all the things are. So if there's a video record or something, it's there. All the videos are there.
I would also say, if you have dug out all the individual videos, if you've gone to the trouble of finding them all, put them in a playlist and say, if this would be nice if we had this, then send us the link to the playlist and we'll know exactly what you have in mind, and then it's much easier for us to understand your suggestion. Okay? So this is one last thing I would say about being a volunteer. If you put in some energy and effort yourself rather than just telling us, oh, you should fix A, B, and C, tell us to say, I'd like to help fix A, B, and C. How can you help me to fix this? And then you'll get a much better response than, this is broken, that's wrong, do more work, okay? Because we're all volunteers, okay? Wendy has a burning question, because we're supposed to turn this room around.
To relate to that, which is there was quite a bit of work done by volunteers with videos over the years.
Yeah.
And one of the problems is that information gets lost from one time to another. So the whole thing would be previews, the whole thing would be taking the sessions, taking different things. We spent a huge amount of time and actual money going and collecting all the old high videos and videos, and a lot of them have disappeared. And so there's a to be able to better manage the
Yeah.
property,
So,
if you will, both with SIGCHI and other related.
So just hang on. So Lauren Terveen is now chairing the SIGCHI history group. So he's basically going to be looking at this because one of their first tasks is there's a huge body of tape with all of these things, and that's one of their responsibilities is to figure out how to, yeah, with tapes, yeah, 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 yeah. So there's a committee that's looking at that. It's volunteer effort to actually do that work. Yeah, but Lauren is looking at that. But that's been being looked at for a long time. That's probably a decade's worth. So sometimes when it's really tricky, it's hard to know where to begin. So if you have an idea for where to begin on like doing that kind of work, just send us an email.
But I would argue that things like the video previews is something where it used to be required, that it wasn't, that it is, and then get rid of them, and then back. And that's actually really bad for the community. I know that individual authors don't necessarily want to do a video, but from the outside of PI, that's how you find out. It's a
Sure.
paywall. It's an extraordinary benefit to journalists and to people outside the community. And so things like that, I think we need to get some stability in being able to continue that and having a standard way of.
Okay, the next session begins in here in 5 minutes. So if you have any more questions, just come up and see me. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming. Make sure you've signed up for the session so I can send you an email with all the details. And if you have follow-up suggestions or comments or questions, just send me an email. So thank you very much. Not at all.